When talking about mobile rhythm games, one game often stands above the rest when talking about quality of content, song selection, and general popularity. Arcaea stands at the top of the proverbial mountain of mobile rhythm games, providing the most premium rhythm game experience for mobile devices, with frequent content updates, an in-depth story, excellent original songs, and monumental crossovers with other rhythm games. Arcaea is a game that I was behind on for a long time, so over the course of a month or so, I spent time catching up on the game. What I found was a breadth of excellent rhythm game content, story, and surprises to find. What I also found was an insane combination of unlock systems and progression mechanics, which throughout almost the whole journey to the newest story content, served as walls occasionally discouraging me from progressing. From mobile game style energy systems, to packs with content you paid for behind unlock walls, to arcade style unlock grinding with meters building up over songs and clear requirements, the game's progression often feels like an awkward blend between a free-to-play mobile game, a paid home rhythm game, and a grindy arcade rhythm game. For the sake of clarity, I want to say right now that this is not a review of Arcaea's gameplay or charting. Despite what we'll cover today, I like Arcaea a lot. I've really fallen in love with the gameplay and the game's ability to draw huge names in rhythm gaming, create collaboration projects with other rhythm games, and create an overall very high quality rhythm game for mobile is 100% deserving of praise. I'm also not at a high enough skill level to critique charting, so I'll leave that to the more experienced players. What I can talk about is my experience progressing through the story in 2023, which is the main route that new players will take when trying to catch up on Arcaea. Despite the game having tons of amazing content, the progression systems present lots of walls for new players to get into the game and catch up to seeing so much of that amazing content that I've finally gotten to experience. So today, let's talk through the game's progression and unlock systems and my experience with them, and also see if we can make some suggestions on how it could be changed for the better. A big thanks to some of the Arcaea players that I consulted when I was writing this script. I had them help me proofread my points to make sure I was making fair arguments when talking about the progression systems, and I also took some input and suggestions from them on what they wanted to see improved in the game's progression systems. I've tried my best to make this video centered around well-founded constructive criticism. So a huge thanks to those people for helping me with checking it over. With that, let's get into it. Hey everyone, happy 2024. Just stopping by quick to say the Patreon has been updated with some new rewards, and if you want to see my videos 2 days early, that is now one of the perks for the $5 and up tier. That's the only plug we're doing today. We're gonna get right back into it. This is a long one. I really hope you will enjoy it. This one's been in the works for a long time. So yeah, sit back and enjoy. So I'm gonna go through the Arcaea story from start to finish and talk about the progression systems you run into at each step. I'm not gonna go into specific story details, but there will still be occasional spoilers, including for the newest 5.0 content, so here's your warning now. With that, let's start with the oldest main story content in the game, Eternal Core. Eternal Core's story entries are unlocked by simply clearing a few select songs from the Eternal Core pack with either Tairitsu or Hikari selected. This can be done on any difficulty and is very easy to progress through. It doesn't require any specific partners or anything else. Nice and simple. When we get to Luminous Sky and Vicious Labyrinth, however, things start to get a bit more complicated. Before we go too far, I just want to mention that the main way of getting content in Arcaea is to simply buy it. Almost all song packs relating to the story are $5, barring a few that have append packs for a little bit more money. Personally, I'm fine with this price, and generally you simply get 5 songs for $5 in a pack, though sometimes it's more than that. Something to keep in mind, however, is that often unlocking at least one song in the pack that you paid for is not trivial, something that we'll see in the next 2 story sections. In Luminous Sky and Vicious Labyrinth, the game's progression systems are really revealed to the player. These chapters are when the player is first forced to interact with the game's most well-known and controversial progression system. It is no doubt the elephant in the room, so let's talk about World Mode. World Mode is Arcaea's main progression system, as is made very apparent by being the largest menu button on the game's main menu. World Mode is a mode wherein you have 12 energy to use on progressing through maps to unlock songs, partners, and items in the game, some of which are free and some of which are gated behind paid content like partners and even some songs. Progression speed is tied to the partner you use, each of which have stats detailing how fast they will progress on a World Mode map related to your play. On normal world mode maps, you use 2 energy at a time and play songs to progress through the map, but on so-called legacy maps, you can use up to 6 energy at a time per play, and also use the game's currencies, memories, the paid one, and fragments, the free one, to boost your progression speed. Sometimes in early story progression, the game requires certain specific partners to progress the story, and some of those are locked in world mode. Almost all story-related partners in world mode reside in legacy maps, which does make getting them a bit easier. But you do have to start dipping into this energy system to progress through world mode, and running out before hitting a certain partner can mean halting your progress on the story for the rest of the day while you wait for your energy to recharge. Or until you pay to refill it. Across Vicious Labyrinth and Luminous Sky, you're required to unlock a few partners for story progression. They aren't terribly long to progress through, but Fracture Hikari's map might take more than one set of energy depending on the partners you have and what level they are. Aside from that, as you progress through the story, you just need to play some specific songs with specific partners, which the game often details for you. We'll come back to world mode later, but for now, that's what we need to know for story progression. That said, eventually you're going to come to a wall where the game tells you to find a path to a different future, with not much hint as to what you're supposed to do. This is the first of the unlock systems the player really has to grapple with, so let's talk about Grievous Lady and Fracture Ray. Grievous Lady and Fracture Ray are the boss song unlocks for Vicious Labyrinth and Luminous Sky, respectively. These are unlocked by the game's Anomaly system. Anomalies often involve playing a certain song with a certain partner and fulfilling a certain meter requirement to activate said anomaly. Once activated, the player will be able to take on the Anomalies challenge and unlock content if it's completed. Grievous Lady and Fracture Ray are the first 2 Anomaly songs put into the game. Let's start with Grievous Lady. To have a chance to unlock Grievous Lady, you must play Axiom Crisis on the difficulty you want to unlock, either past, present, or future, with Tairitsu selected. When you do this, if you have enough meter by a certain point in the song, the game will glitch out and transition to Grievous Lady on the chart difficulty that you had selected for Axiom Crisis. You are then forced to play the song immediately with Hard Gauge. If you clear the song, you unlock the chart instantly. If you fail the song, you gain anywhere from 5 to 15% of the unlock and must play Axiom Crisis again and re-trigger the anomaly. For Fracture Ray, it's arguably harder to get. When using Hikari Zero with her skill sealed, once you hit the anomaly point, you have to make it to the end of Ether Strike with your gauge decreasing and your visibility worsening as you play the song. Only if you make it to the end and transition to Fracture Ray do you even get a chance to unlock the song under the same conditions as Grievous Lady, that being a hard clear. Same deal with failing post-anomaly, you get a small percentage of the unlock and must re-trigger the anomaly to try again. Okay, so what are the issues here? Well, for starters, the game tells you next to nothing about how to trigger this anomaly, having only a vague hint in one of the story entries. The ability to trigger it is made easier by having the specific partner at a higher level, and Fracture Rays in particular requires sealing the partner skill, which is something I wasn't even aware was possible until I had to try to unlock this song and looked it up. The game does actually tell you that you're able to seal a partner's skill on the tutorial for partners when you first open the menu, but by the time I was trying to do this unlock, truthfully I had completely forgotten that was even a feature, and didn't think it would have a mechanical impact on unlocking a song. Additionally, it's triggered by playing a different song, which means that if you were trying to unlock this with no help, you would simply be attempting to play random songs, and you might not even be using the right partner, and the ability might not be sealed. I have no idea how you would figure this anomaly out without looking it up. I assume this was done originally so that players would collectively discover the unlock method by trying different things when the update was released, but today this is simply a barrier to new players and something they must simply look up as the game provides no hints. Now for the anomalies themselves. My main question is this: why hard clear? This criticism will be mainly centered around future charts, since that's what I was unlocking. Grievous Lady and Fracture Ray are 11s. They are not easy charts. They also both feature 4-finger holds, so if you're not ready for them, you're almost guaranteed at least one fail, requiring re-triggering the anomaly, which is playing either half of or all of another chart. In terms of story progression, it's not terrible, since you can do it on present or past, but the thing is that clearing the anomaly only unlocks the chart on that difficulty. So you can progress the story, but if you want to unlock the chart you're having trouble hard clearing, you're forced to slog through triggering the anomaly over and over again. And the thing is, you might already be able to normal clear the song, but normal clear and hard clear are two totally different things. When I finally unlocked Grievous Lady Future after getting the minimum 5% on almost every fail, I normal cleared it first try. So it wasn't like I couldn't play the chart or anything. A big reason I don't like this system is because it ruins the reveal of a song. These are dramatic, story-relevant, really good boss songs. I personally would prefer the game would just let me play through the song the first time after figuring out and triggering the anomaly. Forcing the player to hard clear the song or fail it up to 20 times ruins the reveal of the song, and sadly this is an issue that will come up later as well. If they're firm on maintaining the hard clear system, maybe a slightly more engaging system than just failing the song 19 more times could be added, like something that slightly lessens the challenge over attempts. But hard clear aside, the main thing these need is either a direct in-game hint about how the anomaly is activated, or just being able to directly attempt the song for the hard clear again, so failing it and unlocking it is at least faster. I think having to trigger the anomaly is fine if they hint at it, just let us play through the song once and unlock it instead, or make it normal or easy clear. It was demotivating to try to trigger these anomalies over and over, only to fail the unlock song almost immediately. It really put me off from playing, but clearing it was required to progress, so I just bit the bullet and did the lower difficulty for the moment, which was way too easy. Once you've progressed through some world mode and fought your way through the anomalies, a few more clears in Luminous Sky and Vicious Labyrinth with each of the partners will get you to the next and last of the classic story chapters, Adverse Prelude. Adverse Prelude doesn't really have any unlocks or requirements, just some clears with certain partners, which is pretty simple. A few entries later concludes the classic story chapters and flings us straight into the next era of Arcaea, Black Fate. Anyone playing through Arcaea's story from start to finish will see a noticeable shift in quality here compared to the classic story packs. Black Fate's songs are just really, really good, and the story overall is presented better as well, with some visual novel style cutscenes instead of just pure text boxes. You'll also notice that the difficulty of these charts increases quite a bit as well. As I mentioned before, I'm not going to be able to give meaningful chart critique, but it seems, at least to me, that they were experimenting with pushing the difficulty of the game up in a meaningful way around this time, sometimes to good effect and sometimes in ways that seemed a bit overtuned. I'd argue they got the balance of chart difficulty better a little later on after this, so Black Fate can feel like quite a step up in difficulty. Progression in Black Fate is quite easy for most of the chapter, simply requiring certain songs to be cleared to see a new story entry. That's true all the way until the completion of VS6. This is where the game's arguably hardest unlock challenge awaits the player, Tempestissimo. The ending of Black Fate presents players with what could possibly be Arcaea's hardest challenge, maybe even still today. Selecting the blacked out song on the song select after VS6 presents players with a list of unknown unlock requirements to be revealed as the player completes them. In a similar way to the Grievous Lady and Fracture Ray requirements, these are not hinted to the player in any way. Finding some of them is possible by simply playing songs in the Black Fate pack, but I wouldn't say they're super easy to just get by accident. The requirement to clear Equilibrium, Antagonism, and Dantalion in sequence definitely seems like something that's designed for a time when the whole community is trying to figure out the unlock requirements, similar to how the requirements for Grievous Lady and Fracture Ray were most likely discovered, rather than a single player trying to catch up and figure out what to do without looking things up. This is a running trend with Arcaea's unlock design. After finding all the unlocks for the difficulty you're trying to clear, you'll instantly unlock Tempestissimo upon completion. I actually really like that the song just unlocks at that difficulty, barring one exception, rather than making you play an anomaly to get the unlock. Clearing Tempestissimo on any difficulty will unlock VS7, the last story entry placed on the map. However, that is not actually the ending of Black Fate. To get to VS8, the final story chapter, you have to go through Tempestissimo's Anomaly. Tempestissimo's Anomaly is by far the hardest thing I've personally seen the game throw at the players. Despite the unlock requirements for the song itself not being terribly bad, the anomaly activation requirements are much more cryptic and also not hinted at in the game at all. First, to get the Tempestissimo anomaly, your fragment count's 2 last digits must match, so ending in 11, 00, 22, etc. This requires players to do weird balancing with partners or buying charts with fragments to get the right amount of currency to make the digits match. I have absolutely no idea how players are supposed to figure out that they have to do this. Once again, you have to use Fracture Hikari as well, though she must be unsealed this time. When these two conditions are met, playing Tempestissimo and getting enough gauge will trigger the anomaly about halfway through the chart. This anomaly upshifts the chart to 1 difficulty higher and requires you to clear the song from there. The only catch is, you are forced to do it with the game's hardest gauge, Tempest Gauge. Tempest Gauge, frankly, is insane. It is essentially a bleed gauge. Your meter drains passively over time, and missing notes or hitting notes makes the gauge drain faster or slower, or gain faster or slower. Because of this, it's very easy to fail the chart almost instantly upon the anomaly activating and the gauge and chart switching. Now, as I said before, you thankfully don't have to clear the anomaly to unlock the past, present, or future chart, since you unlocked it before starting to try this anomaly. However, you do have to clear the anomaly on future if you want the beyond difficulty. And I'm no insane Arcaea gamer, but the premise of having to unlock arguably the hardest chart in the game by sight reading half of it on the hardest gauge in the game is frankly totally insane. There is a percentage-based pity unlock on this at least, but I'd love to know how many players have ever even cleared this anomaly. You're also required to clear the anomaly on any difficulty to progress the story, and even clearing the anomaly on past is probably somewhat challenging for lower level players, since it forces them into a present 9. And for people who can't sight read the future 10+ on Tempest Gauge, they're forced to play the anomaly on past, and for them, the present chart is probably too easy. This whole anomaly just feels very oddly balanced. The Tempest Gauge, in my opinion, is way too difficult a gauge to use for a progression mechanic. Completing this anomaly gives the player access to a very short world mode map that will unlock Black Fate's final song, Arcahv. This is actually an updated unlock method from before version 3.12 of the game, and is very simple since it simply requires one play in world mode. This tells me that Laur is open to the idea of lessening or reworking unlock requirements, so that's great, even if simply relegating Arcahv to a map is somewhat boring. Additionally, upon playing Arcahv immediately after unlocking it, you're not actually allowed to fail. You get to play through and experience the entire chart once on your first viewing with some additional effects for a dramatic touch. I'll mention it again later, but I really think the game would benefit from letting players view new story-relevant unlocks in their entirety on the first go-around, since it helps to keep the song reveal feeling dramatic and important. Arcahv concludes Black Fate and sets up the story for the conclusion of Arcaea's first main story arc. So, it's time to talk about Final Verdict. Final Verdict's story progression takes place in a mode called Axiom of the End, a screen with 5 different songs that are all required to be unlocked to progress the story. Each of these songs has a few different unlock conditions that are vaguely hinted at to give the player access to attempting to unlock the song. Right off the bat, Final Verdict has some issues now that it's not current content anymore. The hints given to the player for Final Verdict are somewhat cryptic and often don't provide the player very much direction at all. For example, the text might read something like, "A tempest descends," or "The battle begins again." While vague, these are somewhat solvable. In this case, these involve clearing a song with Tempestissimo and restarting a song on the results screen, respectively. Something like this, I think you could figure out without too much direction. However, as Axiom progresses, they get increasingly vague or complex. For example, one of Pentament's unlock hints is "Submit to Resignation." This unlock condition requires the player to exit out of a song after the last note. I wasn't even aware that this was possible until I was trying to unlock Pentiment, because in the past I had tried tapping the pause button after finishing a song, and if you wait too long, it doesn't let you do that. So I had assumed it was impossible. The funny part is, that's not even actually the requirement. It doesn't have to be explicitly after the last note, it just has to be near the end of the chart, as seen here. But the wiki sure says it needs to be after the last note. My point being here, players trying to figure out vague hints may end up going to the wiki, and even the wiki might be wrong. World Ender's Sunder the World, Wield a Miracle requires playing one of the previous story-relevant boss songs with a matching partner, which is a pretty vague description compared to what you have to do. Another one for World Ender is A Song at the Start of Time. One might assume that means you have to play a song from the first story section of the game or from the game's oldest update. But no, you actually have to play a song within 3 seconds of the minute on your device's clock ticking over. But the biggest offender is Testify, the final song in the pack. I believe the main offenders in here are Take Her Hand and Contemplate Finality. Contemplate Finality is kinda just funny. It requires you to idle in Axiom of the End for 4 minutes. I could feasibly see a player sitting on the screen while trying to figure out unlock conditions. The weird thing, though, is that this requirement doesn't actually unlock while you're on the Testify Unlock Conditions page. Sitting there for 4 minutes will not get you the requirement, which is kind of wild to me. I'm sure anyone in Axiom by this point of the unlock chain will be looking at the requirements for an extended period of time, trying to figure out what to do. I don't know if it was a technical limitation or something, but I really think they should have made it possible to unlock this while looking at Testify's requirements. The other offender is Take Her Hand. Take Her Hand requires the player to first favorite all Tairitsu partners that they have. When I was progressing through this, I wasn't even aware that favoriting partners was a mechanic in the game. The feature to add favorites was added in the same update as Final Verdict, so it was probably more obvious to people playing at the time, but I had no idea as someone playing recently. Aside from that, I certainly wouldn't have thought that favoriting partners had a mechanical impact on anything, so I'm certain I would not have tried this on my own. After figuring this out, you are required to play a conflict side song that has Tairitsu on the song jacket. Conflict and light side songs are a sort of hidden metric for songs in the game that can be basically boiled down to if a song has Tairitsu on it, it's conflict side, and if a song has Hikari on it, it's light side. During the writing of this, someone actually told me that the light blue or dark violet bar on the left side of the song indicates which side it is, and I literally didn't know that until I was typing this sentence. This isn't directly communicated to the player anywhere, though I think over time this is something you could probably figure out. Unfortunately, I didn't though, so this one had to get looked up. After finally getting all the unlock requirements for Testify, a bar appears on the bottom of the main Axiom screen. This bar requires players to either play a light side song with Hikari or a conflict side song with Tairitsu, and once doing that, must switch to the other partner and side. I think a player would reasonably drain the bar once by accident, but figuring out why it drained might be a little tricky since there's really no hints for this one. My main complaint about this progression system, and some of the others in the game, is that, in my opinion, these were clearly designed to have been solved by a large group of people around the time of release, rather than by a solo player months or even years later. A lot of the hints don't have enough direction or invoke obscure game mechanics the player might not interact with otherwise. Don't get me wrong, I actually like the idea of these collectively solved unlock methods. They really should just add more direction or hints for new players coming through, so that they don't have to consult an outside source or wiki just to progress. All that said, we're not done with Final Verdict just yet. You might have thought after getting these little unlocks done, you'd be rewarded with a song. Well, that's only half the equation. The hard clear unlocking from Grievous Lady and Fracture Ray is back in Final Verdict. Once you've gone through the unlock requirements, clicking the song plays its preview movie and has the player select a difficulty from what they have unlocked. I just want to stop here and say the overall production quality of Final Verdict I have no complaints about. The songs are all amazing, and the visuals of the pre-song movies are spectacular. They did a great job with the production value of Final Verdict overall, and it really shows. Once the song starts, similar to Grievous Lady and Fracture Ray, you must clear the song on hard meter to unlock it. Same as last time, these songs are not easy, and some of them feature new charting mechanics to this point exclusive in Final Verdict, so you can't be ready for some of the tricks the chart throws at you. Here's where I offer my main complaint about hard clear unlocking, specifically in Final Verdict. When you fail one of these songs, you get a minimum of 5% toward the unlock. That means you may have to try and fail the chart a maximum of 20 times before unlocking it. Every time you fail, you're forced to watch that preview movie again, which starts to wear on you after a while, especially when you're playing on a new patch that breaks the preview movies for some reason. Additionally, if a player decides after a few attempts that they're unable to hard clear the chart, they may just decide to repeatedly fail for the 5% to complete the unlock on their desired difficulty. This is, frankly, not good game design. What is the point of forcing a player to just repeatedly fail the song if they decide they can't clear it on hard meter when they might already be able to clear it on normal meter? It's kind of just pointless when the player has already gone through fulfilling unlock conditions. Again, I personally think they should just let you play it once the first time to keep the suspense of the unlock intact, or offer some alternative lessening of conditions rather than making the player spam hard clear fails. I was really excited to hear Arcana Eden after hearing the preview, but I couldn't play the song well enough to hard clear it on my desired difficulty, so I ended up having to play the chart almost 20 times to get the unlock by failing. And by that point, I was completely sick of playing the chart, even though I proceeded to normal clear it right after. All it does is ruin the reveal of songs by making the player sit through the preview and fail the song over and over again. I really think this should be lessened somehow. You can make the argument for a player to just play the lower difficulty if they're having too much trouble with the higher difficulty, but oftentimes the harder difficulty might be too hard and the lower difficulty might be too easy. There's really no way to get that middle ground with hard clear being the requirement for these unlocks. Funnily enough, when you get to Testify, they let you play the whole thing without failing. I don't really know why the rest aren't like this. I don't really understand why only some unlock songs get this treatment. The unlock conditions are enough of a challenge and puzzle in my opinion, forcing players who are just on the line of not being able to hard clear their desired difficulty into repeated failing. It just feels very excessive. After some more story, Final Verdict concludes in dramatic fashion. There's some post stuff in FV with some of its own goofy unlocks that I won't touch on today, but with the high tension finale of the story, it was easy to see why everyone was so excited for this when it came out. I just couldn't help but feel that all these barriers I had faced on the way might have turned some players away before getting to see the best stuff the game has to offer, for both songs and story. Even more good story stuff has started just recently, so to conclude our story exploration, let's talk about Lasting Eden. Lasting Eden is the first part of Arcaea's main story Act 2, originally disguised as a side story pack. The progression of Lasting Eden's story is quite simple, returning to playing certain songs with certain partners as detailed by the game. However, this pack does force the player back into world mode for a non-zero amount of time, as Maya is required to progress the story in Lasting Eden. The map isn't short either, and since it's new, it doesn't have legacy status, meaning you must use 2 energy at a time. Once you have Maya, progression through Lasting Eden Chapter 1 is as simple as unlocking all the songs in the pack, though the future chart of Abstruse Dilemma does feature a potential gate. Potential is the game's rating system, and we'll chat about potential gates a bit more later. In Lasting Eden Chapter 2, the player is faced with unlocking Argina, the pack's boss song. This is done via a cipher-style unlock condition by playing songs and changing certain values around the game, then checking the unlock again to see what happened. The values the player has to get correspond to letters and are used to spell out the names of other songs in the pack, which must then be played. I do think this is a pretty cool unlock method, and this one felt a lot more solvable without outside help than almost anything previous in the story so far, even if I did get a little lucky with some of the unlock requirements by accident. I think this type of puzzle is a great direction to be going in, with something that isn't nearly as vague or obscured as some of the older unlock requirements. Once all the unlock requirements are done, you're presented with a course you must clear. It uses a meter that does not reset between songs, and you must clear 3 songs without failing to get to Argina. If you fail, additional maximum meter is given to the player based on how far into the course you got, making subsequent attempts easier. I think this is the best pity system the game has used to date, allowing the player slight easing of the difficulty over time without completely deleting the challenge or forcing the player to purposely fail themselves to get through it. I do really hope they keep the progression systems moving more toward this style, where over attempts the challenge can be slightly lessened, but not completely removed. And I think it's a great middle ground between unlock methods that are too hard and too easy. So despite all my complaining I just did, I think they've got something going in the right direction recently, so that's great. When the player makes it to Argina, you can't fail the song and get to experience the entirety of it in the first play. This is once again, in my opinion, a fantastic decision, as Argina is an incredibly flashy, story-relevant song with super crazy visual effects and even some unseen to this point chart gimmicks. Playing it for the first time is a real treat, even if you can't do that well on it, and I'm very glad they once again decided to let the player see the new unlock through. Argina brings us to the current day with the most recent main story unlocks. This is all the content a new player has to go through to catch up on the story. It certainly isn't a short adventure, but it is exciting, if not somewhat marred by annoying or confusing unlock systems. The main story is a great ride. I just want Laur to make it a bit smoother for new players to experience. Regardless of the issues raised, I'm really looking forward to seeing what they have in store next. Okay, that's the main story covered. Now all that's left is... Okay, so we've got a couple more systems to hit here. Let's get back to the sore spot I mentioned earlier, World Mode. I don't think it's a stretch to say that World Mode is really egregious in terms of catching up as a new player. The amount of maps and time needed to progress them is insane, and progress is often limited by the amount of energy you have. Unless you're willing to fork over memories to recharge your gauge, that is. World Mode could be an entire video on its own, but I don't think it's a stretch to say a lot of people don't like it. Energy systems are never really that fun to interact with, especially when you're encouraged to spend money to recharge the gauge. Maps take a ton of time to go through, and even spending all your energy can take a long time, as you're only able to spend 2 energy at a time on most maps in the game. There are legacy maps that allow you to use up to 6 energy, as well as use fragments and memories to allow you to boost your speed, but a lot of maps still don't have this status, despite there being plenty of old maps in the game by now. I honestly don't know how a new player is expected to catch up in a reasonable amount of time without spending memories to speed up progress. Generally speaking, the fastest way to progress is to use Tempestissimo if you have Black Fate, but Tempest Gauge brings its own host of problems to World Mode. Since the gauge is very difficult, you risk failing the song and making barely any progress on the map, so players will often just play the same song they can consistently do well on, making progression in World Mode repetitive and boring. If you hit a restriction tile or a random tile, the game might restrict you to a set of songs that you can't clear using Tempest Gauge, so you might be forced to use a less efficient partner. World Mode would really be so much more manageable if they at least let you spend 6 of your energy at once on any map, even if they didn't keep the fragment and memory boosting from the legacy map status. Though it would be appreciated, there's already complaints from players about a lack of places to use fragments once you've unlocked all songs and completed all legacy maps. It would also be nice if more partners were viable for World Mode so that you didn't have to use the same partner every time. I get the fact that the hardest gauge is the most rewarding, like, I get the risk-reward there. If you're going to stick to that, it would at least be nice if we could use certain partners' skills with a different partner selected for at least visual choice. Tunithm introduced this feature in Tunithm New, and honestly, it was a great addition to not tie the mechanical aspect of a character to the appearance preference. It's crazy too, because like not even only free content or event stuff is placed in World Mode. Sometimes it's content from a pack you paid for, like a partner or sometimes a song. Or sometimes you need that partner to unlock a song in the pack they're from. Say what you want about energy systems versus paid packs, but I find it pretty crazy to put content someone paid for behind forced interaction with a mobile game energy progression system. Things like this just make the progression systems in Arcaea feel sometimes weird and overlapping. Oh, and that's not even talking about Beyond, which is basically stacking a second map system on top of the first map system. Beyond is a separate chapter with maps for unlocking single extra charts. That progression can be sped up by filling the Beyond boost meter when playing other regular World Mode content, which makes progression through Beyond maps more efficient. As much as I don't really like the idea of whole extra maps for unlocking single charts, as that just seems a bit overkill, I do appreciate that you can increase the efficiency of progress by engaging with another system in the game. They do interact nicely in that way, even if filling the Beyond boost meter reminds me of old Blaster Gate from Sound Voltex. One other progression-related thing to quickly touch on is potential gates. As I said before, potential is the game's rating system, and there are a few songs in the game where a certain chart is limited by your profile's potential. Some charts cannot be played without having the prerequisite potential. Personally, as I've written this, I've gone back and forth on the idea of whether or not blocking a player from certain content based on whether or not the developers think the player is ready is good game design. I can sort of see the idea of protecting the player from themselves or giving players a reason to care about increasing potential, but at the same time, I'm generally for trying and failing at hard content in basically any game. I'm pretty sure there are others out there like me that would just rather try the hard thing instead of the game telling me I'm not ready for it, but I'm not really sure on this one. So that's every single progression system in the game, I think. I definitely don't want to act like the game is in an unfixably bad state. It just feels like a lot of things could be improved slightly. Now, what if I told you that So, a Switch version of Arcaea exists. It's $40 and features a progression system designed for fully offline play. But honestly, it also has fixes or quality of life for a big chunk of the issues discussed here in the mobile version. The main obvious difference is that the Switch version has no stamina for World Mode. That would obviously be amazing for the mobile version, but I also understand that that's the most unrealistic thing to ask for. I know why the mobile game has the energy system, it's just more common in the mobile game space. But there are other things that could be great for the mobile game's progression systems too. In the Switch version, fragments can be used to level up partners instead of only being able to use ether drops. This would give something for mobile players to sink fragments into, especially since a lot of those partners probably aren't getting use in World Mode due to the previously mentioned lack of efficiency. Though the Switch version improves on this problem also, as many of the stat lines for the partners in the Switch version are rebalanced versus the mobile version to be a bit more viable. If they aren't going to give us fragment leveling, making some partners more viable overall would be a nice touch. Honestly, the Switch version has lots of great uses for fragments in general. It even helps with some of my issues with vagueness in unlock conditions, like how in the Switch version you can use fragments to get hints to the solutions of the Final Verdict song unlock requirements. I know the argument is that it's for offline play, but like, why not have those hints on the mobile version too, so that people don't have to go to a wiki to figure it out? The main point here is that the Switch version's reworked progression system could work just fine on mobile and allow more players to figure out how to progress without outside help now that those unlock methods designed for working with a larger amount of people are old. In my opinion, it would be a huge quality of life change to bring those things over to the mobile version. I'm not gonna sit here and believe that they'd remove energy from world mode on mobile, but some of the other stuff could be really nice. So, where am I going with all this? I think the main thing to get at here is not only the number of progression systems mobile Arcaea has, but how they all awkwardly mesh together and create clashing expectations from the player of what is expected of them to progress. In a free-to-play mobile game, players expect to have to deal with energy systems and a time versus money approach when it comes to getting content over time. In a full home rhythm game with DLC packs that you buy, players often expect song packs to provide all content they bought at moment of purchase. In an arcade rhythm game, players might expect to encounter systems requiring challenge grinding or repeated play for unlocking content. Arcaea Mobile features all three of these systems with a lot of overlap, and I think it creates this weird mix of expectations on how a player is supposed to progress and acquire content. To be honest, for the longest time, I thought most of the game's content was in world mode. But it turns out if you're trying to progress the story, you don't actually have to engage with world mode that much. But in that story mode, you're going to run into arcade-style hard clear grinding and other progression challenges, sometimes barring you from content you bought. I don't want to say it's some sort of crime to make a game challenging or grindy, it isn't. But I think this mix of progression systems can affect how fair players perceive acquiring content to be. The Switch version of the game answers some of my complaints, and I really do hope they move some of those quality of life changes to the mobile version, as I think they could help smooth the progression through the content out. And I hope they'll consider relaxing or potentially reworking older anomalies and unlock systems to not require as much outside information due to not being new content anymore. The game as a whole, to me, as a newer player, seems to cater much more heavily to their existing player base than to new ones. Which is fine. I mean, I understand developing content for the people who buy said content, but the wall of progression presented by world mode, as well as barriers to story mode progression that long time or high skill players literally do not encounter, leads to this odd divide between newer or lower skilled players and higher ones. I encountered multiple instances throughout my progression where I asked other players about a puzzle or a certain thing being overly difficult, and the response I got was often that they didn't realize that some players might have trouble with it because they were good enough to one-shot an unlock, or they were around for content during its release and got a puzzle solution during a group solving effort. Again, I really don't want to make the blanket assertion that the game shouldn't be hard, but it's lacking some smoothness for the average player where they're regularly asked to engage with content that was designed for a large group or is too easy or too hard for them. And it's hard to not feel like some of that could be smoothed out a little, at least for the sake of progressing through the story to see all the cool and amazing stuff the game has to offer. Arcaea is a fantastic rhythm game to play, and at the end here, I just really want to stress again that I think Arcaea is good, and I like it. It just feels like there might be some room for smoothing out the ramp for newer players to get them up to speed with the newer content, especially now that the game is entering its second major story arc. I'm no game developer, I know adding a lot of this stuff can be costly and time consuming, but I do really hope Laur can manage to smooth out the progression a bit and get more people playing this amazing rhythm game. Thanks for watching, and thanks so much to my supporters on Patreon. Check out my Twitter, Twitch, and community Discord. Links are in the description below. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.